is going to share her story this evening. Thank you, Risa. It's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. And thank you, Michael John, for asking me. This is quite a privilege to be able to speak here tonight. My name is Risa M. I am a recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 3rd, 2004. And I am just so delighted to be able to be here to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous through the Big Book. Um, I so when I first, I'm not gonna get too much into a drunk-a-log, but I'm gonna talk about a little bit of how it's been, what it's like, and what it's like now. And I'm very nervous, so I might be stumbling over words, and I apologize for that. However, so when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I knew that something was wrong with me. I lost the will to live. I couldn't really be around people anymore. I didn't feel like I had much of a purpose. When we read those bedevilments in We Agnostics, that was pretty much me when I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. And the thing is I didn't know if I was an alcoholic or not. I walked in because a boyfriend, he had problems, so I was going to go support him. And as I sat in that meeting, there was just this giant hit of, I think I need to be here too. And I started going to meetings on my own, and I'd hear people talk about their stories, and they would talk about going to jail, and they would talk about being homeless, and they would talk about living under the bridge, and they would talk about all these things. And at the time I was 24, and I still had an apartment thanks to my mom paying it off for me, and I still had a car, and I was hanging on to my job by a thread. And so I didn't think I was an alcoholic because none of that stuff had happened to me. And I just kept questioning people. How do I know if I'm an alcoholic? How do I know if I'm an alcoholic? And these people would say, well, you'll do you'll do until a real one comes along, or, just stay and you'll find out. But nobody really ever explained to me what an alcoholic was. And at about 10 months dry in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I started to feel like I wanted to die worse than when I first walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I sat in front of my bathroom, under my bathroom sink, and under which was bleach. And I just sat there thinking about, I'm going to drink this bleach. I'm going to be done with everything. I no longer want to live. And then the thought came to me, if I'm this miserable in sobriety, why am I still sober? And at that time I did take one more, I went back out one more time. It was very brief. And at that time, it hit me that I didn't want to live that life anymore. My life up until that day, walking into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, was every single day I would wake up, I would come to, I would find alcohol, I would desperately find alcohol. I would go to my job. On the way to my job, I would be thinking, I gotta stop this. I gotta stop doing this. I would throw my alcohol out. And by the middle of the day at my job, I would start thinking about how I needed to get alcohol back into my home, because I just couldn't go through the whole day sober. And I would just try again the next day. And I would get out of work, I would go find more alcohol or other things, and I would just hang out all night long and come crawling up my driveway again at 6:00 in the morning, promising myself that I would never do that again. And so when I went back out that last time, all of a sudden there was this giant thought in my head that said, I don't want to keep living that way. It was like Groundhog's Day over and over and over again. But instead of in the movie where things got better, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so at the time, Rochester has a convention. We have an Alcoholics Anonymous convention. And that day was the first day of the convention. And I went there and I told people that I had gone back out, and and there was a ton of people there who just said, well, keep coming back, and stuff like that. And I saw a friend of mine there, and she and I had kind of been like these angry people who put down AA a lot, put down people who read the big book a lot. And we were both real angry. And I saw her there, and she was like, I hadn't seen her in a few months, and she was so happy. She had a smile from ear to ear, glowing with happiness. And I went up to her and I said, hey, what happened to you? You're happy. And she said, well, don't laugh, but I started going through the big book with a sponsor. And I'm learning that I really do need the steps out of the big book, and that I believe that I've recovered from this hopeless state of mind and body. And I was just kind of like, all right, that's good for you. And the convention went on, and I had all the merriment that you get when you're at a convention, and it was fun and it was enjoyable. And that night, Sunday, when it was over, I went back home to my 2 cats, and I wanted to cry my eyes out because I was absolutely miserable. And I went to a meeting on Wednesday. I saw this friend again on Wednesday, and she was still happy. And I was like, what happened to you? Why aren't you miserable? I mean, the fun of the convention is over. And she told me, she's like, I told you, I went through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've worked the steps. And I said, oh. And at the end of that meeting, I grabbed her before she left, and I said, will you do for me what your sponsor did for you? And she said, yes. And she said, however, you need to be at my house on Sundays at 6:30, ready to read the book. You need to make, my home group is at 7:30. We're going to go over there. It's going to be your home group. You're going to have whatever service position we tell you you're going to have. And, you're going to get numbers of women in the fellowship because you can't rely fully on me for your sobriety. And I wanted what she had. She was happy. She seemed joyous. She seemed free. And that's definitely not how I was at the time. And so I really wanted what she had. And so I did everything she told me to do. And she started taking me through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And at this time, I still didn't know if I was an alcoholic, because I still didn't know what an alcoholic was. And that woman took me through the book, and she took me through that first step. And we read the doctor's opinion, and we learned about that allergy. And I learned about how when I put alcohol in my body, I'm different than, my grandfather would have a Manhattan every once in a while at dinner, and he'd have one Manhattan, he'd put it down, and that was it. And he went on with the rest of his day. And we talked about this allergy, and there were many, many times I did not go out to get drunk. There were many, many, many times where I said, I have to work. I worked really late at night. I have to work tonight, so I'm just going to go out with the girls at 6 p.m. I'm going to have 1-2 drinks max, and then I'm going to sober up before I have to go to work, and I'm going to go to work. And as the bartender is starting to pour me that drink, my mind is already starting to think about all the people who haven't died in my life yet, that I haven't told my boss that I had to go to this funeral or that funeral. I started watching the news to find out what diseases were going on that month, like strep or bad colds or bronchitis, because I might come down with one of those. And as I started to put the alcohol up to my lips, something happened to me. And at the time, I didn't understand it was an allergy at all. What I thought was happening was I just changed my mind. I'm not going to just have two. I'm going to have three. You know, everybody's having a good time. I don't need to be the down person at the party. So I'm going to have just one more. And that started at the first drink. And then by the second drink, I'm already thinking, all right, well, if I drink four, and you start to do the calculation on, all right, well, if I have four and two of those are beers, but two of those are shots of tequila, and then I wait this much time and drink this much water, I'll still be able to probably get to work without seeming like I'm drunk. And usually by the third one, I'm calling my boss, you know, using one of those excuses. You know, I think I've had 5 or 6 aunts who've had funerals. In reality, I only have 3. But yeah, and that was what my drinking often looked like. And so my sponsor at the time discussed that this was this allergy that it talks about on in the doctor's opinion on XXVIII in the 4th edition, that, you know, the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. And what that means to me is it talks about some different types of alcoholics. And, you know, I went to college. I was around a lot of drinkers in college. I mean, people who would even put beer in their cereal. But when college was over, these guys would, you know, be like, all right, real world starts, I'm getting married, you know, and they would put down all the partying and the drink, and they would all of a sudden, you know, do better. And I always looked at them and thought, well, I never drank as much as they did. You know, I never, but when the real world was supposed to start for me, I wasn't there for it. I was still, you know, just like, well, I know I'm seeing all my other friends getting these real jobs and getting these families, but I'll do that later. You know, I'm really focusing on my career right now, so I'm just going to keep drinking over here. So she explained that to me, and I was able to see that in my own life. And then she discussed with me this mental obsession. So it talks about that in there's a solution. Maybe I don't have my book all marked up right now, but it talks about how if we know, okay, yep, so on page 23, or actually starting on page 22, it says, we know that the alcoholic keeps away from drink as he may do for months or years. He reacts much like other men. So if my problem was just alcohol and this allergy, then all I would need to do is stay away from the alcohol for a few months, a day, you know, and I wouldn't have this problem anymore. You know, I would be able to control the amount of alcohol that I put in my body. I would be able to not put it into my body, and all would be good and my life would get better. So, and then it talks about, we are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. So what this is telling me is, all right, just put the cork in the bottle, don't drink. But then there's this next paragraph. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility. I lost my job. I'm out there to party. It's a great occasion. It's summer. It's, you're going out on the boat. Let's have a beer, like all sorts of these excuses. But when I look at my drinking and I look at the havoc my drinking has brought, I am by myself. I want to die. At the end of my drinking career, I really was very suicidal, but I was terrified of killing myself. Like I couldn't do it. So what I would find myself doing is at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I would be driving around our inner city in Rochester, trying to act like an idiot so somebody would just shoot me in the head. And that's how I lived for at least a year before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. So thinking about those things and what drinking always brought me, how is it's summer and I'm going on a boat and having a beer going to be a good enough reason to drink? Well, it wasn't, but I unfortunately, I also suffer from a mental obsession that even when alcohol is not in my body, I can't stop thinking about how it's just going to be better this time. It's going to be different this time. If I drink only these, if I only drink on these days, if I, and I try to do that, calculations of an alcoholic to figure out how this time I can make it work. And so my sponsor had explained that to me, and I was finally able to see that, yes, through my own experience and through, looking at many other experiences of how that allergy hit and how the mental obsession came up in my mind, I was able to finally say, yes, I'm an alcoholic. And after that, we continued to go through the 12 steps. And once I had that knowing that I was an alcoholic, I had a drive behind me like no other. And I was able to just say yes to the whole rest of the steps, be open, be willing, be all of those things. And I worked the steps with my sponsor, and I had a spiritual awakening as a result of those steps. And I started at 7 months sober to sponsor people and to get of service and be of service in my home group and in Rochester. And I got really, really involved in all of that stuff. And what also happened was I became really cocky because I also knew that everybody else didn't know as much as I did in the big book. And I also knew that they didn't know about the things that it said in the big book. And I would tell people all the time, I would be on this soapbox ranting and raving about how amazing Alcoholics Anonymous was, but I wasn't making it very attractive. Nobody really wanted what I had. And after a while, what happened was that started to cause me to not want to, I started to feel my ego started to creep in and started to tell me that what I was talking about wasn't worth it. Nobody likes me anymore because I'm a big book thumper. Nobody wants anything to do with me. And all of a sudden, as the years started to pass, I slowly became more interested in what people thought of me than carrying this message and being of service to God and to the fellows about me. And I became more interested in service to myself and making sure people liked me and hoping that people would understand that I was the best woman in Rochester and that they would throw parades for me because I was just that amazing. And that continued slowly, taking, becoming more and more spiritually sick as the days and the years went by. And what happened was at 16 years sober, which was March 3rd, 2020, I wanted to drink worse than I did in my whole entire life. COVID had just hit here. We had gone into lockdown, and we were being told to wash our hands and use hand sanitizers. And I couldn't even have hand sanitizer in my car because every time I put it on my hands, I wanted to lick it off. And I couldn't clean my house because every time I would start to spray cleaning stuff, supplies around, I wanted to spray it in my mouth. And I gave my husband the isopropyl alcohol because I was terrified that I was going to pick it up and drink out of it again. And it was a very, very scary time for me. And as a as a sober alcoholic, a woman of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was doing things that no sober woman should be doing. I was looking for attention in all the wrong places. I was still beating this table of what the big book was. And a few weeks ago, I was listening to a foundation meeting, and somebody talked about how we're students and practitioners and teachers of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I've come to realize is I was a student. I tried to be a teacher, but I definitely was not being a practitioner of this program or these steps. And what happened is I went to a speaker. I didn't go to it actually. My husband, who's also in this program, when he knew I was really depressed. I was not spending any time with my family. I had them all week long, my kids and I. It was just me and my kids. So once he came home for the weekends, I would be like, see ya, I'm out, I'm done. And I would go up to our room and I would stay there for the whole weekend. I wouldn't participate in my family at all. I'd pretty much sleep all day long. And I was miserable. And one afternoon, Saturday afternoon, my husband comes running up with the computer and says, you need to hear this. You need to hear this. Because at this point, I believed that Alcoholics Anonymous didn't have an answer for me anymore. I didn't think that it would work. I thought that I'd have to drink in order for myself to be like reset. You know, I thought I had to be reset. And he came racing up and there was this woman that he was listening to at a convention or something on Zoom. And this woman talked about how in double-digit years of sobriety, she was going through exactly what I had gone through. And this woman was just a shining, exciting example of this program working. And so that week, I went to her home group and I started listening. And I'm somebody who, whenever I got a new sponsor, would tell them, I know more about this big book than you do. You're not going to be able to teach me something. And I sat in that meeting for the first time, and within them reading, it was a PPG meeting in Austin, Texas. And within the first 2 paragraphs of them reading, I heard a different book. I heard a book that I had never read before. And my mind was blown. And of course, though, I didn't think that I could get sober with just any sponsor. I needed her, I needed her. And so I reached out to that group and, asked if they could help me find a sponsor, i.e., can you tell her I need her to sponsor me? And they gave me the number of another woman, and I called that woman, and that woman saved my life. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm crying. And God gave me the right person to hear from. God gave me exactly who I needed to hear from, because she was going through the same thing as I had, but instead of staying, she drank at 16 years sober right before. And I listened to her, and finding out more and more that I was a little bit cranky sponsee. I thought I was perfect, but she oh no, she was the mouthpiece that God gave me, and she took me through the steps again, and she took me, and what I had realized is I was trying to control so much of my life, and I believed I was an alcoholic, but I also believed that I had become powerful over alcohol, that all the knowledge that I had and all of the years that I had and all of that was going to keep me sober, and I didn't need to practice it, and I didn't need God anymore, and I didn't need the people in these rooms, and I didn't need to be of service, and I didn't need any of that because I had knowledge. I had enough knowledge that would keep me sober. And I found that that's not true. That gets you to where I was when I was 16 years sober, which was just, I mean, you could have lit a match, a mile away from me, and I still would have fired up a fire. And there's a few paragraphs that have really changed my life this last year in the book. But one step in particular, the third step, when I first went through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous all the way up until a year ago, I seem to have thought that the third step was what I was while I was drinking, and only while I was drinking. And what I've realized is that this is me without a spiritual solution. Without a spiritual solution and without being close to God, I am still this self-seeking, obsessed person. I am running the show. I am just trying to get you to fit into my world. In step 9, it talks about how we are now, our purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and our fellows. Well, what I was doing was trying to make you fit into my life. You needed to fit into the puzzle pieces that I have put you in. And I saw that as I did the 4th and 5th step, but I reread the 3rd step with a new thought process that this is me daily. It's not me every few weeks. It's not me, once a month, once a year. This is me on an everyday basis. I wake up and I am this person. And what I had stopped doing was step 10 and step 11 and step 12. And I realized that I would be that person who would sit on that stuff, and all of a sudden I would be up here doing really good, and then right down. And I needed to do another inventory, a full-on inventory every year or so. And now, noticing all my selfish, like little tiny things. And I used to think, I only go and do 10 steps with my sponsor on big things, like huge things that are happening. Until this one day, I made dinner for my husband. And, I love to cook for him. I love to show my love through cooking. My desires were to be of selfless, to give of myself to him. And that sounded weird, but I love to see him smile. I love to be able to put that smile on his face. So I made a meal. It was a new meal I'd never made before, and and I made it, and I was so proud of it. And my family and I sat down for dinner, and I placed this plate in front of him, and then I sit down, and what I do is I just stare at him, and I look at him as he's sitting there in front of his dinner, and I just stare, and I stare, and I stare. And he looks at me. I go, "Are you going to try it yet?" I'm now making him very uncomfortable. And he's like, "Sure." And he starts to eat the side dish, in which case he's not doing what I want him to do, because he needs to eat the main meal. So do I stay silent? Do I calmly eat my dinner? No, I have to tell him that he is tasting the wrong thing on his plate, and that he needs to taste this other thing. And so then he tastes that thing, and he doesn't give me the response that I want. He doesn't give me the accolades I'm looking for. And he doesn't, "Oh my gosh, this is the best thing I've ever had in my whole entire life." And what happens next is my stomach drops into my stomach. I am no longer happy with the fact that I made this meal. I start to doubt myself as a wife, as a person, as a everything. I start to ruin the meal for everybody else because I sit there in my seat pouting the whole entire time. He does no longer wants to eat. He and I are no longer talking. And then I get cranky at the kids because they're just kids, and I start yelling at them. It's pretty selfish and self-centered, and I never looked at it before. And those are the things that I would continually do over and over and over again, and never talk to my sponsor about that. That's little. That's something I can get over on my own. I don't need God's help for that. Yeah, I do. I do, because it's those kind of things that build up over and over again that just take me down to these paths of no longer having God in my life. So I've started doing better 10th steps. I've started doing nightly inventories. I've started being able to catch things before I need these large, huge inventories again. I have realized that the more that I put into my spiritual connection with God, the better it is. And that nobody else, not, the perfect sponsor, not the perfect home group, not the perfect friends are going to help me to have that connection with God. The only person that can help me and the only person who has control over any of that connection with God is me. And that is one thing that I learned is I'm not powerless over my actions. I can take control of my actions and pray. I can take control of my actions and do things that I don't want to do today. I can go and help somebody and be on the phone with somebody that I might, want to just go and watch a show or go do something else. But I can make that decision to go and not do that and be of service. And one of the funniest things that always happens is that there are times, not so much anymore. I love to work with people today. I love being able to talk with another alcoholic and watch, a new woman's eyes light up and be able to get this thing. I absolutely adore that. I absolutely love to be able to pass along the message of the freedom that I've been able to get after so many years of just sitting in my muck. And, but there are times where I'm like, I'm just too tired. I'm just too tired. And what happens is this miracle. I pick up that phone and I start to talk to this person, and you'd think I had drank 17 coffees. I all of a sudden I'll get off the phone at 11 o'clock at night and I can't sleep for the next few hours because I am so just elated with what God had been able to provide me in that phone call. And it's always works out that way. Always. The answer is so simple. It's so simple, that prescription, clean house, trust God and help others. It's the last one I try. I get myself all bogged up and it's the last thing I try, but it's the one thing that always works. And I know I'm supposed to be speaking for a little bit longer, but I am starting to feel God say, all right, you've talked enough. So I'm going to shut up with that. And thank you again, Michael, for allowing me to be of service at this meeting.